Okay, welcome to Global Soccer Conclave and a session about the future of football strategy, keeping in mind COVID-19. Before I introduce the panel, I'd like to welcome Mariel Kureis. She's General Manager at the Johan Cruyff Institute. Mariel, welcome, and if you would be so kind as to kick us off, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Brendan. Good evening to you all. It's a pleasure to be here and to introduce this panel to the audience. Just a quick note to say that we're happy to be part of this Global Soccer Conclave, the first time as an academic institution specialized in educating the next generation of leaders in sport management. We're happy to make a contribution to knowledge transfer within the football business especially. Actually, the Johan Cruyff Institute has been educating leaders and sport professionals for 20 years already in different programs specialized in sport management, in football business coaching, and in sport marketing and sponsorship. And more than 9,000 sports professionals have already taken programs with us. Besides that, we always are eager to and willing to participate in summits like these in order to share with other professionals within the sports business, and specifically this one in football business, our experiences and our knowledge. And we're happy to do that with the collaboration of our alumni, as both of you, Daniel and Brendan, are, but also at the same time as partners and also as professors, as Professor Kenneth Corsten is and Daniel Martin also. So we have a group of specialists here in football business. I will leave it to you now. Thank you for the opportunity to take part in this summit, and I wish you a lot of joy and success in the upcoming webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariel. We appreciate it. So just to introduce myself, my name is Brendan Fourie. I'll be moderating this session. I'm co-founder of Four Nations Football Consulting, and with me I have today Kenneth Corsten. He's assistant professor and strategist in sport management at the University College of Northern Denmark and Aarhus University. He's also a board member at Four Nations Football Consulting. We've also got Daniel Martin. He's the VP of Finance and Corporate Development at Redbird FC. So if you two gents don't mind diving a little bit deeper into your backgrounds, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan and Mariel for the introduction. I'm also a co-founder of the sport management program at University College of Northern Denmark. And there we have also educated professional footballers and other athletes over the years at the bachelor's level. So I have found a natural bridge to collaborate with Johan Cruyff Institute, which have many very relevant programs at the master's level. And on top of my academic background and professional background, I also have a UEFA license. I've been a coach at the elite level. I've played at the elite level, and for the past 7.5 years, I have taken various positions and roles in the world of football, been the head coach for the men's reserves in the Danish top club, Aalborg BK, before taking their women's team from the bottom of the third tier of Danish football to the best league over a period of 2.5 years as head coach, and culminating with a promotion to the best league last summer. And then I have various strategic advisor roles in the club now, and I'm also related to advisory roles concerning professional FAs, leagues, and clubs. So I think that's all for me, Brendan, in terms of my introduction.
And from my side, I'd like to say it's a real pleasure to be here to collaborate on this webinar. Thank you, Mario and Brendan, for the introduction. Myself, I'm a chartered accountant by background, similar to Brendan, trained in the Big Four in Deloitte. I've had finance and operational roles in football clubs, such as Celtic in Scotland and also Al Jazeera in the Middle East. The most recent role I have is working for Redbird FC. And by way of background, Redbird FC is an international sports platform, sports and data analytics platform, deployed through Redbird Capital Partners, an American investment house, which I'm sure we'll go on to talk a bit more later.
Thank you very much. It's good to have both of you on board, and Mariel, thanks a lot yet again. Kenneth, why don't you kick us off by giving us a feeling of what is the state of play currently and how are clubs recovering from COVID, especially focusing on match day revenues?
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. It has been a time of change, definitely because of COVID-19. I've always thought that football is very dynamic, but we have seen a whole other level of dynamics because of COVID-19. And before the crisis or global pandemic, European football saw an ongoing increase in revenues. However, now the pandemic has been a dark shadow over the global and European football landscape in preventing fans from attending games, and also because of that damaged the revenue generation considerably for clubs and owners. And the way I see it, this development is displayed in a suffering operational reality for many clubs, and we have also seen an accumulated value of football clubs, which suddenly decreased for the first time in many years after years of annual growth, and therefore it has been this time of change and turmoil, also with the ill-fated European Super League as an important example. And the pinnacle of the aftermath of European Super League has, at least for me, been the case of Messi's transfer from FC Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain. I mean, the two parties wanted to extend the collaboration, but FC Barcelona's financial state tackled the opportunity to extend the collaboration, and PSG, a club with deep-pocketed owners and thus another ownership structure than FC Barcelona, became the big winner of Messi's football skills. And FC Barcelona fell due to specific governance rules, and we have also seen a changing environment in terms of governance in football. In Spain and in Barcelona, the balance between salaries and revenue generation demonstrated the state of global football due to COVID-19, where even the global top clubs have been rather recession-proof earlier compared to clubs lower in the football economic hierarchy. But now we also see or saw global top clubs being influenced highly by the situation. And here was a situation where a club seemed to have applied debt to finance its operations over time, and this degree of economic gearing became a barrier when this unexpected global pandemic hit, and where the duration of the pandemic went from Corona wave 1 to the extended periods, and thus put a stop to the production line at times, and devalued the revenue generation at other times. And right now, I just hope for the fact that growing vaccination rates will lead to a time of normalized standards in the football economy, with fans back in the stands. And let's also hope that the positive wins, which we have seen in the light of the UEFA European Championship this summer, where we have seen that despite Corona, fans have craved football live in the venues, in front of the TV screens and through digital outlets. And I hope that, although we have seen clubs being very negatively impacted by COVID, that this example of this summer's European Championship can be translated into a similar pattern for the domestic league events and the international club tournaments, as things hopefully will open up soon. But again, there's no doubt that this has caused a negative financial periodization for the clubs, as witnessed by the many rights questions that we have seen during the pandemic. I mean, not seeing the revenue growth tendency as in the decades leading up to the pandemic, and we've seen some rights issues also on the broadcasting side, with examples from France and England. So hopefully we'll be back to normal soon, because this pandemic has been very tough on global and European football.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it was a pleasant surprise to hear the actual sound of actual fans the first weekend that they were back, and let's hope that it helps, especially the smaller clubs which rely on match day revenue so much more, help them get back on their feet. But Kenneth, when I listen to you, I hear a lot about uncertainties and unexpectedness of the pandemic. Daniel, I mean, all of this brings opportunity as well, as we've seen with Redbird FC, who have invested in sporting properties like Toulouse FC and IPL franchise, the Rajasthan Royals, without giving away too much. What could be the strategy behind this?
Yeah, no, listen, thank you, Kenneth, there. I think that was an excellent overview of what we have all witnessed and experienced in the last 12 to 18 months. I mentioned at the start, Redbird Capital Partners are obviously the private equity house behind Redbird FC. Now, Redbird Capital Partner has always taken a long-term view of investment in high growth entities across their verticals. Sport being one of their major verticals, historically in the US. So I think it's important to mention up front, taking that long-term view is important. Not all investment houses may adopt such an approach. So if you take that view, and you're also bullish on sport and some of the sentiment that Kenneth mentioned there about the Euros, and how great it was for fans to unite when spectators back in the stadium, I think that's part of the thinking behind what we're doing at Redbird, thinking that longer term, we think there is certainly value in sporting assets. Maybe if I take, specifically, you mentioned Toulouse and Rajasthan. If I look at Toulouse and football, it interested me actually. Out of 45 professional sports teams, sports football teams in Europe, there are 45 American owners. And 64% of them have purchased in the last 3 years. So you say to yourself, what do Americans see in European football specifically? And I think there's a couple of things behind their investment thesis. They like the flexibility of the lenient ownership or opportunity that can come from that, vis-a-vis a franchise centralized league model. They think there's great content value in European football, particularly the history of the clubs, the stories that have been told over the years. They do see some operational lagging behind perhaps where American sport has seen itself advance in recent years. So they think there's some value to be added there. And often, the American view on sport in terms of franchise model, it's often portrayed they would like certainty in no relegation. But actually, Redbird, we see potential upside in that football success factor. Toulouse being the case in point. At time of purchase, it was heading into the second division. Had 17 years in the top flight. So actually value from driving operational performance. If I go specifically into Redbird's thesis, we have a data analytics entity, Zealous Analytics, which we also think adds value to things that we are doing around player recruitment and on-field performance to help generate that value. So I won't lie, there has been headwinds this year in European football, specifically French football. I'm sure you've all sort of followed the media rights collapse. So it has been an interesting year, a challenging year, but we think after 1 year of operation, we're in good shape, hopefully coming out of the worst of the pandemic. Moving on to Rajasthan Royals and IPL cricket briefly. I'm sure there's a lot of audience members who will know the ins and outs of IPL, but the more we look to the numbers and the fundamentals around such a league, the more interesting it became. various traits of being quite nascent still in its commercial strategy. Some of the economic safe points, such as salary caps, it was very much in the image of the NBA. There was a scarcity of asset, being only 8 IPL teams. And actually being invited to ownership of one of these teams is very rare as well. So we were excited by some of the upside in the IPL, and also wider in cricket globally. I'm sure Brendan, South African, you'll know just the potential that is there for a global game. So that's why we thought that made sense, our investment at that point. And yes, we are looking ahead to hopefully brighter times post-pandemic.
Thanks for that, Daniel. It's really insightful. I think the Rajasthan Royals is an interesting one. I mean, you see these T20 and shorter format competitions popping up everywhere. So definitely true what you're saying in the last couple of years, for sure. Kenneth, we talk about the Rajasthan Royals being in India, and that's sort of outside of Europe and European football, where everyone is sort of focusing and getting all the stats of all these American investors. But is it a reality, or will we see investment in football properties in Asia and in Africa? And if you think so, where do you think the attractive prospects are?
Yeah, I think that will continue to grow. But first, a short note on what Daniel mentioned here. I think that it was very interesting that Daniel mentioned the time dimension here, because I think that's a key thing for any investor going into football, taking a long-term perspective, because if you focus on American investors, which Daniel competently also mentions here, it's interesting to look at global football and European football in a comparative light with European football, because as Daniel mentions, the legacies of these European clubs is definitely interesting. And if you look at the growing valuations of, for instance, MLS or Major League Soccer teams over the years, you can still find very good bargains in the leagues outside top 5 in European football, where you will see a cohesion up to the bigger leagues, and the potential also of reaping some benefits from transfer activities. And if you combine that with the fact that we talk about the pandemic and its dark clouds, we have also learned how we missed football. And as I said, the UEFA European Championship numbers supports this argument. And with this in mind, I think it's also important to say that we have also emphasized that football is the world's #1 sport, and that few events over the course of time, if any, can move customers and market shares such as live sport and football. And this may also explain why football and the media enhance the importance of playing games, and thereby giving people this entertainment option in their living rooms as a beacon of light in a troubled time. So I think, you got to take it from a case-by-case perspective, and if you can find relevance, and that being in terms of the local community, but also scalability in terms of expanding the relevance from one market to different markets, there are good opportunities still linked to investing in football, also regarding markets in Africa and Asia, where you see unexploited pools of talent, and moving players from A to B is always interesting in football if you have competencies in terms of developing players, of finding undervalued players. But again, COVID-19 also reflects that cash is king, and investors looking at distressed clubs may be able to find future value in buying their way into assets that under normal circumstances are relevant in respective communities and markets. But again, this depends on the ownership situation of these clubs and their market relevance, and how the reality around these clubs can lead to new business in these markets and elsewhere. That's where the value is to be found. And with this in mind, the portfolio model may also portray opportunities for owners with different business activities, as football is a great promotional and mediated platform capable to open doors in new markets.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's just all about uncertainty, and I guess finding the right price for taking on that uncertainty. Let's say in a continent like Africa. I mean, just to tell you what's going on in South Africa, I mean, there's been a lot of sales of the status of playing in the first division. So guys coming in, been trying to get their team promoted for a couple of years, don't quite manage, buy a first division status and move a club which, for instance, has been 99 years old to a completely different province. And I mean, that club just dies. And with that goes 99 years of history and all those fans. And I mean, with that kind of uncertainty in South Africa, which is actually a reasonably well-developed league, I mean, Daniel, that poses some, I mean, as an investor, that must be really uncertain to go and invest some money, even at a cut price.
Yeah, no, you listen, I can resonate with both comments there. Where do I think there may be potential investment opportunities in Asia and Africa? Well, I think we're all aware Africa, that the big play there is the talent pathway, and actually the formalization, maturity and governance models around that talent pathway. I think you've seen some excellent examples. For example, Right to Dream Academy. Some significant investment going in there at the start of the year, but that's how I would see Africa in terms of club football. Some fantastic historical clubs in sort of North Africa, if you think of Egypt, Morocco, and just some of the momentum maybe building around there. But again, I would stress investors would look at that maturity of governance model, and back to your point, Brendan and Keith, on the risk appetite. Maybe moving further right in the world map to Asia, Middle East Asia. I mean, I have had experience of working in a Middle East football club and trying to implement sustainable business models and strategies there. That was very much a bottom-up type approach. But what I can say, you know, from my own insights and work with various consultancies, the UAE and Saudi at national level, they are now starting to implement their strategic plan for their FAs and also their leagues. So that is of interest. Again, there is a sort of maturity progression in the governance and processes, but I think it's evolving. And to pick on Kenneth's point on the Super League, and whilst we could have a whole webinar on that in itself, I mean, I think, you know, disruption, looking at different leagues, is there a possibility perhaps looking around the Middle East Asia, GCC, that something similar could be implemented, given you have these big cities, you have big clubs in certain areas, maybe not enough to have a good league on its own, but actually cherry picking the best. I think that may be something to keep an eye on, and maybe private investment would fund those types of models. So yeah, so that's my thoughts on Asia and Africa as I sort of currently view that landscape.
Perfect. Kenneth, anything to add?
Just that with any investment in terms of money being injected into football organizations and clubs, it also comes down to competencies. You need to activate those investments. And Daniel mentions FC Nordsjælland here and their success with growing the value in terms of their transfer activities and other collaborative efforts with what they do in Africa, and it has also been a matter of successfully integrating these players culturally into playing in Denmark, for instance, but also into a specific methodology in terms of playing philosophy and playing style. I mean, I saw recently that Griezmann was traded on loan to Atletico Madrid. So again, talking about strategic fit here is always something that should be in focus when trying to grow the value of a football club's activities, because we can always discuss whether or not Griezmann was a positive trade for FC Barcelona in terms of what they have been standing for in terms of playing philosophy and playing style. He's a very good player, but again, football is cohesion. History proves a lot of evidence in terms of that. So even though that you see many clubs, also rich clubs, investing highly in winning Champions League titles, the cohesion in a football organization on and off the pitch, we can't ignore that.
Yeah, completely agree. So Kenneth, just touching on transfer activity and this kind of thing, I mean, always in any economy where there's some downturn in resources and activity, you can expect less transfer activity, and we've seen that the Premier League is always the one that's on all the news headlines. They've topped £1 billion again of spend. Yes, it's gone down, but it's still topped 1 billion. What has happened outside of the big leagues in terms of transfer market activity?
I think if you look over the course of the pandemic, overall transfer activities grew when assessing the transfer window in January 2020 with the year before. But overall, it fell in 2020 as a whole, despite the transfer window being expanded. And that's what we have seen overall, that transfer activities have slowed down. Still, England is the busiest marketplace in football, also given the disposable income, if I can use that word, in a transfer market setting here. But we have seen some tendencies. We have seen that over the course of the pandemic, we see a tendency for more players going out on loan. We have seen a tendency also with more sell-on clauses being integrated into the contracts of and transfer activities of young players, maybe to drive the transfer value down as of right now, and to see, you know, how the talent will unfold in the years to come. So there have been a decrease in terms of the activities over the course of the pandemic. But I also think, and Daniel mentions what they also do with data in terms of Redbird. I think that we have also seen better transfer market planning in recent years in terms of more data-driven and strategic activities, and thus less spending activities related to silly money.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, Daniel, you can touch on that a little bit, but a lot of times I've read that clubs are now, instead of looking for the biggest upside in the transfer market, they're more trying to limit the downside and trying not to make, like Kenneth say, throw silly money at maybe what you can consider a flop in terms of what fans would call it. Daniel, I mean, how flexible are clubs in terms of obviously having your long-term plan, but with the pandemic and as Kenneth mentioned, some clubs were forced to sell some of their assets at a discount. I mean, how flexible are these clubs in terms of their transfer activity, despite having this long-term plan?
Yeah, well, I think Kenneth mentioned a fantastic phrase at the start, which is cash is king. And to some extent, a lot of clubs have been driven by that need for liquidity and very much short-term liquidity. So to some extent, some of the longer-term planning has gone out the window, but it's been fascinating to watch some of the dynamics play out in the transfer window. Even within that Premier League, whilst it's over $1 billion, you could probably split that in two as well, in terms of the top six spending an inordinate amount on big players, and then the rest maybe having a more cautious approach relatively within England. But things like factoring of transfer receivables, the payment plans surrounding them, the sell-on clauses that again you mentioned, these are all things that we've been seeing as well. I mentioned at the start Redbird FC. We deploy through our zealous analytics, very data-driven approach, and perhaps clubs now are just maybe thinking with limited resources, we just don't have that wriggle room anymore to make as many mistakes. Whilst it's not an exact science or a guarantee using data, the whole aim is to try and maximize your resources and minimize some of the potential errors from these recruitment decisions. Because at the end of the day, we know players, assets, wages, these are the things driving the financials of a football club's P&L and cash flow.
Yeah, agreed. Kenneth, just touching on, I mean, for a lot of these clubs, the only way for them to compete against the bigger fishes in the pond is to be smarter in the transfer market and develop players and sell them on. I mean, with this diminishing a lot with the pandemic, a lot of clubs have looked to digitization to sort of get the edge. Can you give us a bit of insight into if there was any additional revenue generated through this? What has been the best things you've seen? Just give us a bit of your thoughts.
Yeah, but first, if I may comment on Daniel's comments before, because that's the beauty of interaction here. That
of course. Go ahead.
Given the fact that we have a panel here, I'm also inspired and learning, and that's what it's all about in football. If we want positive development, we need to learn. And despite clubs seeing ongoing revenue growth until the start of the pandemic, we haven't seen that clubs have experienced better financial performance, although they have seen these growth patterns. And now they're facing the rough truth here due to Corona, and also a rough truth of players and agents being very powerful. So if you look at Paris Saint-Germain, including their Messi deal, they brought in a lot of free agents. So that's also an interesting tendency. And we have seen that clubs, of course, they are looking for talent. They always are, because their core activity is the ability to compete. But what I also found in terms of my research, there is a FOMO, or fear of missing out effect, related to the ability to compete and thus also to invest in talent to do so. Some clubs want to harvest too many players, leading to panic buying behavior on the sporting front of clubs. So we have also seen their behavior being linked to data investment. Sometimes they invest in data just for the sake of investing in data, not necessarily having a clear data strategy. So investing because of the fear of missing out. And there's also what I would call a production inefficiency in football, which clubs have not tackled when it comes to breaking the code of finding optimization of talent development systems. And I mean, you also have a situation where upward mobility leads to bigger clubs removing talents outside the pitch. So if we have a throw-in coach who can do something specific, or a set piece coach who can do something specific, or a data analyst who can do something specific out of the ordinary, this is just like players on the pitch, and you can also look at the likes of Thomas Tuchel and Jurgen Klopp, who are in Chelsea and Liverpool. I mean, they started both in Mainz, moved to Dortmund, and now they're in the Premier League. So I think in order to enjoy future growth in revenue, a club, of course, must remain competitive, and this is a tough one given the production inefficiencies in football and the fierce competition for talented players, and thus also, and that's my point here, the role of agents in football and their interests.
Yeah, I've definitely seen, keeping my eye obviously during the transfer window on what fans have been saying, and I mean, the Liverpool board have come under immense scrutiny for not investing, but it does definitely feel like a FOMO sort of fan effect, because if all the other clubs are spending, we should be spending. I don't think fans always care who they're spending on as long as they're spending. So definitely agree on the FOMO part, especially from a fan side, and which is such an important factor to control and manage when you manage a football club as well. Daniel, any thoughts on that?
Well, just maybe on the digitization point, the extra revenues. I think if I look at maybe the local league that I support, the Scottish League, I thought an interesting play there was obviously no fans attending the game, but actually having that pass to log on to your club website to watch the home game. So actually changing that avenue that fans can view the game, allowing clubs to still access revenue streams when match day in theory was down. So whilst that seems to be a temporary measure, I do wonder if it opens up wider discussions on how OTT and actually getting media streams direct to consumer, club to consumer, vis-a-vis the traditional big players in the TV rights world. And I think that will be, if we think of football as a global game, we think of Super League, we think of where fans actually are based. I think these are discussions that are very much now something that will be explored as we move out of the hopefully the COVID world.
Yeah, definitely a good point, Daniel, and it also takes the debate to the question of how to spend the money you earn or have earned, and how to build a more sustainable economic model in European professional football and global football, because the players and their agents, as I said before, they have taken their huge chunk of the money pie, and now suddenly came the Corona wave, and because of the fact that professional football to some extent has distanced fans from the public service product that football once was. I think that also with European Super League, as Daniel mentions, and with the pandemic, we will see that football clubs will have to open up for more fan engagement-based management and revenue models. For instance, through increased use of fan tokenization and other means of striving to apply modern technologies and data and more fan involvement to drive future value. I've earlier written on how clubs can capitalize on the technological highway between sponsorship, media content, and fan engagement in sports. And that's the core essence of football's business models. Now we just have to update them to modern way digitization and find out how technology and data and, for instance, tokenization can shape new means of co-branding and co-creation through strategic commercial partnerships.
Yeah, I've seen in a couple of fan forums, though there's been some. It sounds like I just read fan forums the whole day, but interesting to see things from both sides of the fence, you know. And some of them have been really upset with these fan tokens. It sort of came across in some areas as clubs trying to squeeze more money out of fans and giving them votes on things that don't really matter. What are your guys' thoughts on clubs getting the balance right, and does it work at some clubs? Does it not work in other clubs? What do you guys think?
Go ahead.
On you go, Kenneth. On you go.
No, go ahead, Daniel.
Just reiterating Brendan's, but I think it's a balance, isn't it? I think you want that fan engagement. You want to build on that, and you want it in a healthy, positive manner. It can be difficult at times because fans will ultimately have their own, perhaps at times, irrational thoughts if you put an investment lens on. But that's part of the passion of the sport. So I think it's balance, and I think it's also geographic and club specific as well. There's bespoke models perhaps for each club out there.
And I think it also comes down to brand relevance, and brand value, because these are matters of how the market adopt your ideas and products. I'm sitting in front of a Mac computer, originally in the 80s, also given the 1984 Super Bowl commercial from Macintosh. They designed a product targeted towards people in the graphic industry, and now everyone sitting at cafes in New York City, London, Milan are sitting there sipping cafe lattes with their MacBooks. So again, it comes down to market relevance and how your customers adopt what you bring on the market. So you need to have this contextual understanding and have your fingers on the pulse in terms of what your market wants. And you've seen that growing in football as well. In FC Business Magazine, I wrote an article along with Bas Snotter and Daniel Rascher from the US about cluster analysis and how football clubs can improve their marketing and commercial efforts by increasing the understanding of their various fan groups. So I think, again, instead of just raising your finger to feel how or in what direction the wind blows, you must have this contextual understanding also from clever market analysis and what you can also do with market data linked to B2B and B2C segments.
Yeah, agreed. I guess, Kenneth, it's also about knowing what to do with that data. I think a lot of clubs, like you mentioned earlier, collect for collect's sake, but I guess the winners will probably be the ones that know how to use it, when to use it, and especially how to engage with their fans on that deeper level by knowing them better, using the data, I guess. Daniel, just to sort of take us into the final stretch as the substitutions start coming on, what are the possible solutions for? Sorry, I just had to get one in this.
I like it.
What do you see as possible solutions to the challenges of COVID-19, and perhaps discuss maybe the most important one? Or I know it's very club specific, but try and enlighten us.
Yeah, no, sure. And listen, I think we have touched on a number of these during this call. So let me try and maybe summarize. I think maybe we'd all agree the key challenge has been a lack of liquidity and cash, perhaps during this period, driven by the fact revenues, as Kenneth articulated, have significantly fallen. But actually, we've all been left with the fixed costs that having players on your book give you. So that's a fundamental equation in the European structure as is. So sustainability is a word for me in terms of sustainable business models. You'll know, Brendan, a passion of mine is trying to have that sustainable model and putting my CA lens on that. There's things I think you can look at club and regulator. So I'll leave the whole Super League regulator disruption that is going out there, and I think there will be perhaps wider governance metrics coming from that. We've already seen financial fair play maybe changing not sure if it's for the best or worse, but there will be further developments and news there. But if I focus briefly just on maybe what can clubs do, because I'm firmly of the believer, whilst there may be things going on around in regulatory level, you know, with strong management and philosophies at club level, you can solve part of the issue yourself. So what are we going to see? Are we going to see you know, clubs impose their own wage to salary cap ratio? Never mind salary caps wider imposed. Can clubs have their own internal matrix and start managing their P&L appropriately? Can clubs use technology and harness it, such as AI technology on injury prevention? And why am I mentioning that? Because that could then potentially limit the squad size you need. Kenneth talked about harvesting players and efficient use of resources, but actually, if you're optimizing technologies to have, you know, a squad that's capable of challenging and being successful, but within resources, I think that's something we might see more of. Great things like X% of players from the academy, so you are building on development. Actually building in perhaps greater percentage of performance-related pay in players. I mean, what we saw in the pandemic was, oh, we're left with these fixed costs. We need to go and negotiate with players to try and defer payments or maybe waive them. But actually, if it was a performance-based or higher percentage towards that, that may be something that could help the model flex in future. So these are some thoughts I had. Again, the data analytics side, I take the points. You know, it's not just having it for the sake of it, it's actually having a strategy around it, investing in people that understand that and hopefully give some benefit. So that's possibly more on the cost side. I think, yeah, sorry, we've also mentioned loans and swap deals that might be a theme going forward in the short to medium term, given some of the trends we've talked about. But these are things I think that will help club specifics just manage through COVID-19.
Kenneth?
Yeah, I mean, cracking the code in terms of the production inefficiencies that I have mentioned before is definitely something that is very important. But also, the new times have brought about a new level of complexity, the way I see it. I mean, there are different motivational factors affecting the football economy. Private equity investors are in this to get richer. I mean, to say it directly, political investors want to gain popularity, international bargaining power, and also to polish their global image, which we have seen in relation to, for instance, Qatar through Qatar Sports Investments and PSG, and FIFA and UEFA want to protect their current positioning and at the top of the pyramid. So I'm also, you know, excited to see how governance will play out in the years to come, because I expect that we'll see FIFA and UEFA, which have battled before the pandemic, but because of European Super League, they joined forces. They had to display a zero tolerance policy towards the European Super League. And as we know through history, a time of crisis leads to a survival of the fittest mode, clashing with solidarity processes, as you have, for instance, seen in the German model. I mean, we haven't spoken much about German football here. They have been known for the 50+1 rule that protects the German league and clubs from foreign ownership, with a few exceptions, of course, and also the company-owned clubs. And the German model is also, for me, an interesting case of what they in Germany call Kooperation. In English, we would probably say cooperation. This is interesting in a football world where professionalization and commercialization has been the norm over the past decades, leading to the pandemic, and especially since the 1990s. So I don't believe that status quo will be the answer here. The situation will definitely lead to changes in the hierarchy, as we have seen Paris Saint-Germain now taking advantage of their situation and more flexibility in France than in Spain regarding governance, and now planning for the future in terms of getting Messi and other players in to their rosters.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I completely agree that this has definitely shaken things up, and just touching finally on the investment landscape again, I'd like to get both your views on what that might look like post-pandemic, taking into account everything that's happened in the last year and a half. Daniel, if you don't mind going first.
Yeah, sure, Brendan. Well, listen, I think we will continue to see the need for capital in clubs. So putting my own lens on this from a PE viewpoint, providers of big finance will be part of the journey going forward. But what mix that will be, I think the most successful partnerships are those investors who are actually partnering with clubs, local partners, strong management, and actually delivering an investment and a club over a sustained period of time, which Kenneth pointed at the start. I think the regulatory and governance models will change, not just across Europe. And I think we will start seeing, whilst Super League may not have succeeded in its current guise, you may see similar trends globally. I touched on the Middle East as well. So these are things that I think we'll certainly see develop in the months and years ahead.
Kenneth?
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to figure out what clubs will be left behind because for every crisis there are winners and losers, and time and context are relevant elements here. I mean, how do you analyze the game? Meaning having strategic game intelligence on and off the pitch. That's something that should be linked to every investment group in football. Although that's hard to find. And what is the timing of your actions? Daniel said in the beginning some interesting stuff regarding the time dimension of investments. So what is the timing of your actions, to use a football analogy to football investments? And there will be an economic periodization as I see it, because cash and liquidity is a scarce resource, and this may provide good bargains for clever investment groups. Again, depending on what happens on a governance level in European football, because I hear rumors that meetings are already taking place across international borders. Also because the pandemic and the fallen European Super League will provide changes to the governance model in European football, at least. And I mean, once a seed is planted, it will eventually start to grow. And there is an increased financial risk in that new investors in European football are not characterized, or if they are not characterized, by ties to the local community. Daniel talks about that in relation to sustainability, and I totally agree, Daniel. We had some incidents in Danish football, Esbjerg being one of these incidents, in terms of not showing or demonstrating a cultural understanding by the owners, and contextual understanding is always a key here. And we had another incident in Vendsyssel FF in the Danish second tier, or the first division, in which Core Sports Capital came in and created some turmoil before the original local owner took over the remaining part of the mess. So sustainable business models in football is also paying attention to the legacy of a club, and respect to the local market, because if you're not capable of producing relevant localized content, the chances of the likelihood that you will succeed in scaling the content across international borders are close to zero, the way I see it, at least. So sustainability is also something, or a trend, that I expect will continue to grow in international football.
Yeah, I guess as chartered accountants, we can only hope for sustainability in football, although it might take a bit longer than we would like. Yeah, but I mean, I guess just to summarize what we've spoken about, it sounds like things have changed the last year and a half, and they will continue to change. And I guess it's about using the resources that you have, optimizing them, and sort of who can not necessarily be the smartest, but sort of do the basics well and sort of understand what football is and how you can best get the most out of your football club and your investment, looking from a private equity standpoint.
Yeah, also, I'm not against foreign investments. That's not why I like the German model. It's very important for me to emphasize that. I mean, we have talked about FC Nordsjælland. We can talk about FC Midtjylland in Denmark. We can talk about FC Helsingør and Jordan Gardner's investment group that came in there, and they are now leading the first division, moving the club up from the third tier to leading the second tier. And most likely they, at least if they continue their performance spiral, they will get promoted to the Super League again. So we have clever and good foreign investors across European football, including these three examples in Danish football. However, I mean, FC Midtjylland got a capital injection in 2011 from an Indian group, but it didn't really take FC Midtjylland to the next level. However, what Matthew Benham did in 2014 did, and that is just evidence that you need to activate your investment with competencies as well. That is definitely the key for me, because that's how you make a difference, and then also the cohesion that I've seen foreign examples in the US and elsewhere where they have built strategic cohesion. So we see a tendency of linking men's football with women's football, and the governing bodies also trying to trickle down more money into, for instance, women's football. And you've seen clever investment groups using the beauty of football, the fact that football is sport number one in the world, to drive community chains in terms of also, initiating lucrative real estate deals that can grow local communities. So not only through professional football, but also linking professional football to football as a community driver, and unfolding the CSR value of football and sport as an activity that gathers people. And I think that's very important, coming out of a dark tunnel based on COVID-19.
Yeah, Kenneth, that was almost as beautiful as Peter Drury on a Saturday afternoon. Thanks for that. I just like to thank both of you for spending the time, and I'm sure our listeners enjoyed the insights that you both gave us, and thank you for your time. And it's good to see you again. The last time we saw each other was in Barcelona, pre-COVID, still walking around without a mask. So yeah, our time has flown, and it's good to see you both, and thank you for your time. And then I'd just like to promote the event. I mean, it's still going on tomorrow. I mean, you can register on the website. It's pretty easy, and there's a bunch of nice panels coming up. None as good as this one, but they'll try their best. Thanks a lot, gents.
Thank you, Brendan. Thanks, Kenneth. Great to speak with you both. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the inspiration, Brendan and Daniel. That's what this is all about.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.